What's up, folks? Casual Dad here with the next in our series of Warlord deck building guides for Warhammer combat cards. Next up, we're going to look at the man himself, Watch Captain Artemis. I'm also going to say the man himself a lot because that's going to come up a lot depending on what faction you are, who you are, when you're looking. But Watch Captain Artemis is one of the first Warlords to come out for Space Marines. He is epic, comes in at the kind of the more expensive end of the ultra cheap Warlords, but still quite cheap at 23 points. His hit points are fairly low, and he has 0 defensive abilities, of course. But his combat stats are pretty impressive. He comes stock with Big Game Hunter and that Deadshot ability that, again, is target acquired, but lets you target an opposing warlord. It doesn't do as much bonus damage as target acquired, but it does let your bodyguards focus their shots on a target warlord, which makes Artemis another one of the key headhunter warlords who is cheap, but also trades aggressively and plays very well against your more expensive bruiser warlords, especially the ones with fear. Being able to hit them from the wings outside of their fear really cuts through their defensive bonuses and makes him a truly excellent piece here. So, really like Watch Captain Artemis. I personally think that he is one of the best Space Marine warlords, if not the best, for sheer flexibility. That Deadshot makes him really dangerous to more matchups than someone of his weight class would normally be. So you do actually kind of want to play him at the opportune moment, but he is one of those cheap warlords who you actually want to play and can swing very hard both with ranged and melee, and with that big game hunter, does hit really hard into warlords he normally wouldn't be able to tackle with. But one of the key things about him is his ability. When you deploy a Space Marine card, a random enemy card loses 20% of its starting wounds. I like it says loses negative, so it looks like it gains, but no, it loses it. So just to say that every single time you play a card, a random opponent will lose 20% of its starting wounds. That is very good. That's really, really good. And that also both does and doesn't scale. So for example, when I talk about scale, so like Tolmaron, for example, adds plus 20% to your friendly stats. So that does scale. The higher your base ranged attack is, the more that increase is going to trigger. This one doesn't care if your deck is low level or not. All it cares about is the opposing card's health. And if you go up against a real thin deck or a really stout deck, like a 3 bodyguard Abaddon deck, that is the last thing, or this is Artemis deck is the absolute last thing that wants to see, because the bigger and beefier the card is, the more damage it'll take every time you deploy a Space Marine card with Artemis. So bigger they are, harder they fall. So he's really, really good, and of course that encourages you to run a full deck. And there is a tricky cadence with him because you want to keep playing your cards so that you're getting the benefit of that. So it's nailing key cards, hitting them as you're playing through the game. But also you don't want to be losing cards too quickly because you want to make sure you have momentum without taking too many losses. So it's an ability to kind of benefit from in-game but not necessarily build around, which is a little bit kind of a tricky balance that makes him somewhat challenging, especially at lower levels. Now again, like I said, he does and doesn't scale, where his ability scales against your opponent depending on how durable and beefy your opponent is. So it's pretty much always good, but if you run up against a horde deck that has a bunch of dirt cheap endless cards, it could easily soak all of your Artemis ability damage points and not ever actually benefit you in game. Another key thing I should highlight about his ability is that it does go through shields. So if you've got one opponent across the table from you, and it's got shields up. Like say, for example, you get your board wiped, but the only card left on the board is the Swarm Lord. It's got his shields up, whatever. You play 3 of your cards, you have now hit him for 60% of his base health without even firing a shot. And then, assuming he's chainsawing through your cards, you can then do it again as you deploy more. So it's pretty good, but that is kind of situational. You're unlikely to outright kill a card with his ability unless you have injured it already first, but it still can come up. So looking at the deck build I have, it's got a balance of some cheaper cards, some cards you expect to die, and then is top heavy with some really beefy cards that you want to keep on the board. So you can both deploy cards throughout the game, but also have some mainstays that stay on the board and are doing damage over time. Now we're looking at a campaign. I've just hit kind of a higher level of that campaign, so we're going to go ahead and do it. I believe I'm at level 26 of a fairly challenging campaign here, which is convenient because I'm not leveling Space Marines this season, so I wanted to show some decent matchups that show how good Artemis is at like a higher competitive level, but didn't have those to show. So yeah, level 26 of this campaign. This is pretty nasty. And right off the bat, you can see that my initiative in this deck is arguably too high. And by that I mean to say that I deployed first. And if you're deploying first on an empty board, then your Artemis ability to do free damage doesn't matter at all, because if there's nothing on the board to take the damage, it doesn't happen. But that aside, I did get a little bit of decent damage out of this with the cards that were on after my first one was deployed. I do tend to see Artemis decks favoring melee, and I personally like to favor melee because some of the most effective bodyguards he can bring are melee-centric. Nuts. And going up against Lilith, this is a really, really gnarly matchup, and that's part of why I wanted to run this one. Because she's a very powerful warlord, and one of the worst ones to run up against with Artemis. You can see I've got some fear on there. I think I did mention already, but I had target acquired in there to kind of highlight the thematic thing where Artemis is a Deathwatch captain, and so a lot of what he does is hunt down priority threats to the Imperium and then take them down with great prejudice. But he's very surgical, he's very targeted, which is funny because his ability is random. But if it wasn't random, it'd be way too good. So, yeah, I kind of appreciate that. Ooh, ouch. That is good, though, so we've got the Incarn's bonus life pulled. So if he redeploys, he won't redeploy with Endless again, which is great, but I do need to bring him down. Yeah, we're going to do that. I may regret it. Sweet. Okay, that's exactly what I needed. Still not enough to get lethal on this turn, but it's definitely a start. And what I'm talking about is the Artemis ability hit the Incarn. To go ahead and take it. Let's see. She's probably going to shoot me. Don't really want to take the melee hit back from the Incarn, but I need to remove it. And I am almost certainly going to lose this because this is level 26 of the campaign, well beyond my card levels. And I'm still looking at a Lilith deck that's got a bunch of cards left in it, and I've barely done any of the damage I need to do here. That said, I'm looking at taking down the Incarn, and I've got some definite momentum here, which is good. And because there's only one card on the board, he is guaranteed to take the 20%, which is awesome. That is a bummer. That guy's over there because Mephiston would have taken him out comfortably and will not take that guy out. Excuse me, I'm sorry about that. But yeah, very cool card. And after this game, I'm going to take another quick look at some of the deck building options we could do after I promptly lose this game. Just because they've recently also added a fair number of Deathwatch cards. So you can do a very thematic Artemis deck that is built around the Deathwatch, which I always really enjoy thematic decks. Sweet, that Deathblow should take out the guy on the left. It is not impossible for me to win this. It is really unlikely, but it's not out of the question. Yes, it is. He's still got 4 cards left in the deck. One of those is a Warlord. Well, actually, hang on. 2 of these I'm just going to kill outright, which will then put my Warlord face-to-face with Lilith herself. No, I'm toast. Because, ooh, that target acquired with me is a little bit of a surprise. But I'm still toast. Lilith herself can comfortably handle him because she does not proc Big Game Hunter, and she's got a bodyguard on Artemis's flank where I don't have any defense. So she got me. At this deck level of the campaign, I was pretty sure she was going to, but that's right. So yeah, Artemis himself is very flexible. He's a very interesting warlord that can build around any attack type. And there we go. And so a lot of the time, a lot of the time you'll see him built around just kind of general melee all across the board. And we got that last one. Awesome. But you can also see him heavy with... I didn't just start the game, did I? Yeah, there we go. Okay. You can just see him across the board with all kinds of different upgrade options. Let's see. So I don't think that these guys really pulled their weight. They're a little bit too expensive. It's one of the things is you do kind of want to balance the deck across the board. So we'll keep this dirt cheap guy in there for that Medicae. And looking at some of these Deathwatch cards, these two are both Deathwatch. They're cheap, they're aggressive, they combo well with his ability, and the combination of Artemis's ability and Deathblow is a really nice combination because it just means constant damage, constant pressure, which goes along very well with his abilities. And just how the deck plays. He's a Vanguard veteran, Raven Guard, so he's not Death Watch. We're going to go on and cruise on down here. Where's our poison guy? Yeah, there you go. Veiled Donatus. So I'll throw a little extra ranged oomph in there, who can be ranged defense, or I can switch off between melee and ranged. That was one thing that was lacking in the last version of the deck, is it was pretty much exclusively melee, which I still kind of prefer. But in this, it is helpful to have that ranged as well. This guy, of course, being the Death Watch and having great stats. Yeah, we'll throw you in there. And that leaves us again with a good big chunk of points there. What can we do with 53 points? And we can also poke around a little bit and see what I can replace with those 11 pointers. But just so you can see, I'm kind of trying to spread the points out. Still fairly focused on melee with a little extra in there, but focus more broadly on melee across the entire deck. Now, of course, obvious choice. Astorath the Grim. But mine is only level 4. Pop this guy up there and then we could talk. That wasn't that funny. I don't know why I laughed about it. Whatever. Okay. Calgar is another good option. He does kind of supercharge everything in the deck while also providing some offense himself. He's on the pricey side, but we'll see how he does. We'll give him a try. And then we're looking at, I could go up to 14 or 12 twice. In the 14-point range. Another thing I should highlight is this deck is 3 legendaries, but everything else is a common. And because Artemis's ability doesn't care what attack type or what kind of card it is, you can really kind of use whatever you want. And it can be commons or rares. I do strongly recommend having a target acquired. Excuse me. And I know there's a cheaper melee target acquired still, but I never remember which one it is. Okay, so we're looking at 12. Let's see, you have 41. Yikes. 73. Yeah, I don't know why I would switch those. So we're going to get 14 and 12. 47. 63. Wow. Those Death Watch boys. They don't pull their punches. I can also go up to 13, but I'd lose my Medicae. I don't know that that matters as much in this deck as it did in the last one. So we're looking at this guy. He's not very good in combos with... Ooh, ranged ready. We are going to throw our shield boy in there. Just to have him. Because he does the offense with Artemis's ability and a little bit in melee and has the shields for defense. And he's a pretty common mainstay. You'll see quite a bit. Now, we used to see Artemis played a lot in kind of the 3K upper tiers of the ladder. I don't see him as much anymore. I don't know if that's because there's more variety, because there are more counters to him in play. Honestly, not sure. I do still think he's very good. And right there, we're off to a better start already, just with me. Okay, if he plays another Psyker, I'm going to need to move this guy because I don't want him to kill outright. Okay, that'll work. I didn't want Trialiorn to kill my Deathblow guy before he even got to hit, which he won't, which is good. And the reason I was looking for another Psyker, of course, is because he's got Brotherhood of Psykers, and his Psychic attack will be boosted flat if there's another Psyker on the board. Especially if that Psyker attacks before he does. And Deathblow, poof, nice. Ooh, nice. I didn't actually think that was going to take out the Farseer. I didn't even think of that. I'll go ahead and gamble on that. Oh yeah, that worked out. So that's good because he's inclined not to shoot me. Because if he does, my little veil here will hit him back really, really hard and also poison him, so we're going to melee that. So this is better, but I'm dialed back 2 difficulty levels in the campaign, which is kind of cool to do these deck builds with campaigns, because you end up with the difficulty... Oh, that sucks. You end up with the difficulty kind of guaranteed to be around the same for each individual match. Whether you win or lose, it's going to be within a similar range to where it was before. I need that to die. So right now I'm level 24, last time I was level 26. They're obviously different, but they're still somewhat on the same level, whereas if I played ladder games, they could be within like 1 to 2,000 separate or different from each other. Man, that thing took a beating. Okay, not great there. Obviously not using those psychic charge abilities with Eldrad. Now this is getting a little bit tricky. And you can see how Artemis's ability definitely makes a difference in these games. You can also see how the randomness hurts it. I'm actually going to go ahead and mulligan this by doing some damage and then taking my card's damage back. Now I should redeploy first because I have 2 cards to redeploy. Nope, I did not. Ooh, that's a bummer. Let's see if we can slow him down with fear. We really only have to pull Eldrad himself, so I'm really hoping one of these hits one of these 2. Nah, that's a real bummer that all of those were tanked by the Incarn. But we still will pull Eldrad out of the deck, which is good. And he's relatively low-level Eldrad, so he doesn't have a lot of hit points. So perfect. This should be an easy win compared to my crushing defeat last round. And then just to do it, I'm probably going to play one more game. Well, maybe not. We've kind of covered Artemis. I'm glad to show him at this difficulty level where you can see where he is definitely a challenging warlord to play, but also very powerful. And you got to see a couple different deck builds with kind of different philosophies of cards against different opposing decks. Neither one was very well tuned, but when the campaigns get to higher level, they're not tuned, but they are way overpowered. So there's no way all of those cards would fit in a Eldrad deck, not even close. Like the Incarn and Jain Zar together would use up most of Eldrad's deck points, plus that big tank that had the big game hunter and all the other filler stuff. Like that was a overpowered deck. So that it's not tuned doesn't necessarily mean it's an easy match. So yeah, again, it is a little bit tricky to find the exact Artemis deck build that you want, but really the biggest reason for that is because he's kind of good with anything. So he's got the best worst problem to have in that there's no real theme to build around. It's very difficult to kind of pin down exactly something. So he is one of the most flexible warlords in the game, and by a mile, I think, the most flexible of all the Space Marine warlords. So he's definitely a good one to toy around with. Especially if you get him up to level 9 where he has that Deadshot. That really is where you get to see Artemis be Artemis and him be truly frightening, where he can actually be a little bit more targeted and a little bit less random, whereas through the course of the game, usually he's going to be fairly random. I mentioned that Deathblow is a powerful piece. You also saw in the beginning I had Njal. Psionic Blast is a really, really good combo for him because what his trait means in a nutshell is pressure. Constant pressure. So if you're doing Poison, Psionic Blast, and his free damage, you're piling a lot of damage on there that isn't even included in your attacks. It's just happening. And that is a really powerful piece, especially against some of the scarier decks out there. So like if you run into a 5-card Badrek, that's going to have real trouble against this deck because you'll hit Badrek with the target acquired. Even if he's chainsawing through your cards, you'll have your Deathblow, you'll have your 20% damage. He's going to be taking a lot more damage than normal, even if you're not able to hit him back as well as you want to. And you've got some durable cards in there that should be able to tank some of those shots. So if you're having trouble with Badrek, really good one. One thing I do want to highlight is that 20% damage is base health. So Artemis is actually a pretty bad matchup against, for example, Greyfax or Rakarth, because the damage he does doesn't increase based on the total health of the opposing card. So you'll actually be doing less damage than you should be compared to the hit points of cards you're going to see if you're against a deck that's adding to its base hit points. So that is something to watch out for, and probably one of the reasons I don't see him as much, because Rakarth is really on a tear right now, and because Greyfax herself is such an issue. And being epic, again, I talked about the importance of that Deadshot. That is definitely something that holds him back a bit. So he is a very strong contender, definitely an upper tier Space Marine warlord, but pretty challenging to play as. Flip side, if you're playing him at low level, he's actually very flexible because you just get free damage. So there's going to be a pretty big disparity between how he performs at low level, which is quite good, and then how he performs at high level, which is also very good. And in the middle, he's going to fall behind most other warlords just because of how that scaling kind of works in reverse. So hopefully that's helpful. One of the more interesting warlords, and I'm glad I had this campaign to kind of bounce off of to go ahead and demonstrate that. Till next time, we'll keep on going through the series.